Lilian Kamanzi will be moderating these sessions. Lilian, yeah, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, SG, for the welcome remarks. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, depending on where we are. So my name is Lilian Kamanzi, work for the African Organization for Standardization. I'm coordinating a project on harmonization of standards and certification of African standards in the agriculture sector, focusing mainly on dairy, horticulture, fisheries, and aquaculture products. So today I've been privileged to be the moderator of this important session. Before we start, allow me to give few housing rules for our members so that we can understand each other. So first of all, please know that our session will run for 2 hours. We end our session at 16 hours. And we have English and French translation for those who might not be able to understand the English language. We would like to request you to mute your mic while we are doing the presentation to avoid disturbance during the presentation. Once you need to be given the floor, you can ask, or you can always send your questions or your message to the chat as mentioned by SJ. So as mentioned, the theme we are having today is on the necessity and the impact of testing and conformity assessment for sustainable development, with the topic on evolving needs for testing of product in trade, industry, and society, and the role in sustainable development. To get more insight and more details on these different topics, we were lucky to have today knowledgeable and experienced experts in the area that we are going to introduce to you shortly. So they take us through different topics in line with the topics of the theme of the webinar. As a panelist, we are having Mr. Ruben as the first panelist that will take us through the experience in quality infrastructure and standardization. We'll be having Mr. Wesley Aondo, Country Manager, Kenya, Regional Verification of Certification Manager, East and Southern Africa in Cotecna, and he's specializing in testing and certification. We have again Mr. Douglas Nyamori from the Intertech with experience in testing, inspection, and certification as well. Last but not least, we'll be having Dr. Erin Crowley, Chief Scientific Officer at Q Laboratories and former president of the AOC International. She'll be focusing on methods validation and food safety testing. Before we dive into all those different topics, I would like to give a brief introduction on conformity assessment. But SG, can you give? I would like to request that you give us an opening remarks, maybe for those who join a bit later, so that we can continue with our program.
Lilian, it's fine. You can continue. As I said, okay. Yeah, I welcomed the participant. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll start with the introduction of the main topic, which is the conformity assessment, to get us through or be able to have the same understanding, but more details will come with our panelists. I hope you all know the World Trade Organization, which is an international organization that regulates international trade. So under the WTO, we have a different framework of negotiation agreements that guide us during the trades, the trades between the nations. So among those different agreements, there's a one that is related to the conformity assessment, which is the agreement on technical barriers to trade. This agreement has been established in 1995 with the purpose to ensure that the technical regulation, standard and conformity assessment procedures do not create unnecessary obstacles to trade. As per the definitions, the conformity assessment refers to procedures that can be used to determine if our product or service systems meet the requirement of set standards, whether regional standard, national standard, international standards, even the technical regulation that have been established at national level. So there are different methods used to make sure that our services or products meet the requirement set. We can have testing. We have inspection. This entails audits at different folders, inspection at the industries level or at the market level. And then we have certification, and different certification. We have product certification, system certification. This is a process where now they have to check again if you have complied with the requirement, and then you are awarded a mark to testify that you are really complying with those requirements. We have also the accreditation. This is also another way of testing or ensuring that those now offering those different services are able to provide the required services in terms of testing, certification, and also inspection. Under the same agreement, we have 3 key provisions that help us to implement that requirement, that agreement. We have Article 5 on conformity assessment procedures. Under these articles, we have different provisions that guide us on how to go about that. The first one requires members to ensure that the procedures that are set are not more strict than necessary to meet the legitimate objectives. So whatever process you're putting in place, you have to ensure that it is responding or it is helping to ensure that the products are of health and safety and you are protecting the environment. The second requirement under the same article, we are required to, or those putting in place these different procedures, to ensure that those procedures are not creating barriers to trade by means of imposing redundant and costly certification requirements. Finally, under this article, you have to make sure that we are transparent and practicing fairness towards implementation of those different procedures by giving equal treatment to your domestic products and also foreign products. We have the Article 6 on mutual recognition and the international standards. Under this, members are encouraged to recognize each other's conformity assessment procedures to avoid duplications. I'll be brief on this because we are here more through our different intervention from our panelists. Again, it gives us a recommendation on how we should harmonize those different procedures basing on international or existing international standards. This is to ensure the best practices to avoid conflict. We have the accreditation and peer review. And finally, under Article 9, technical assistance and capacity building, this is to encourage developing countries to support the other countries that cannot afford this process to be able also to come in on board and apply these different procedures. So why the conformity assessment is important? They facilitate market access by having your products safe and meeting the required standards. You are able to access different markets, whether national, regional, and the national level, because you are sure that they are very safe and they are safe and they can be utilized or used by anyone without any issue. They build consumer trust by ensuring product safety and reliability, especially for us consumer. When you're using a product that has been tested, you're very confident and sure that you'll be not contaminated or not be getting any issue while you consume those different products. They support regulatory enforcement. They reduce technical barriers, as we said, by having the same procedures, by having the same process. This definitely will reduce the barriers that can be arise because of different conformity assessment process in place. So how is it done? There's a different means or way that the assurance of conformity assessment can be done. First of all, we have the first party, which is self-declaration. In this process, manufacturer or supplier declares compliance. You have to make sure that the product you are putting on the market meets the requirement of the standards. Here, we don't need any party to intervene during your process. You just prepare yourself all the requirements yourself, ensuring your product is safe by testing it. And finally, you can put the declaration out and your product on the market. This is also recommended while you are also preparing for the third-party certification. And it's even cheaper compared to other certification processes or methods. The second one is the second-party certification, whereby a buyer or retailer can assess the compliance of what you need to buy or purchase from you. It can do audits, it can do sampling and test the products to ensure that what you are putting on the market is really safe and compliant. We have now the third-party certification done by the accredited certification body. This involves different steps that we are going to see later, but this also can be, in terms of cost, can be costly because you are involving someone else to come do the verification, do the audit, organize the audit file for you, and also finally do the testing. So these are the few methods that can be used to get your product certified. Next is on the how do we link the certification with existing policy of agreements. You know, we have at the continental level, we have the FCFTA agreement. With the FCFTA agreement, the purpose at the end is to create a single market for goods and services, to remove trade barrier, and by boosting the intra-African trade, and also eliminate different technical barriers. So it is in line with what has been established by the WTO. This to show that we are trying to align our process with different existing policies so that we don't create any conflicting process or conflicting agreements. So under the same agreements, as it is aligned with the Annex 6 of the TBT agreement, we have additionally Article 8, which is specifically on cooperation in conformity assessment procedures. So this requires that members or the signatories of the FCFTA agreement are required to harmonize conformity assessment procedures to avoid duplicate testing and certification. They also have to recognize international standards that are used internationally and also mutual recognition agreements. Before I end my presentation, we have different initiatives that are going on at the regional and the international levels, whereby I've explained a bit on the World Trade Organization, where we have this agreement, the TBT agreement, that support this different process. We have at ARSO, whereby there's a specific ARSO Committee on Conformity Assessment, which have developed different standards that are used to ensure the conformity assessment process that are providing the correct results. These are the standards that have been published, and there are even others. We have at international level, we have ILAC, we have IAF, all those different organizations ensure that our the recognition of the accreditation of the laboratory, the recognition of the product, the system, and the certification process. We have AOC International. We hear more from them. They also provide validated test method that helps ensuring that our products and pharmaceuticals, they are really done in the proper way they should be done. We're going to hear more from our panelists from AOC and also for Tecna, as well as Intertech. So finally, what are the impacts of these initiatives? I've mentioned that is to reduce the barriers, ensuring that we have mutual recognition of conformity assessment results. We enhance markets by using the same standards or process. We also ensure that we boost consumer confidence in both in product safety and quality. We support also SMEs and industry by putting in place simplified methods for certification and testing in place. So this is just a brief introduction on the conformity assessment. We are now going to hear more from our panelists. So with this, and without taking much time, I would like to call upon our first panelist. Our first panelist will be Mr. Ruben Gisore. He's a technical director at ARSO, and he's responsible for the coordination of technical programs with regards to standard harmonization, conformity assessment systems, and resource mobilization. He's highly experienced on quality infrastructure and has initiated and contributed to many of the ARSO standardization conformity assessment continental policy documents, guiding the implementation of the ARSO mandates and resource mobilization on the same, and present ARSO in various technical international panel discussion on standardization and its impact on sustainable development in the context of Africa. But prior, Mr. Gisore worked with the Kenya Bureau of Standards as a standard officer, and they represent Kenya in the harmonization of standards and trade negotiations. in the East African community and common markets for East Africa and Southern Africa, where he contributed to formulation of the East African Community Standardization, Quality Assurance, Metrology, and Testing under the ESC SQMT Act and the COMESA Standardization of Quality Assurance, COMESA SQA policy, and participated in the initial stage of negotiation to COMESA ESC SADC tripartite free trade area agreement. And now he's pursuing a doctorate degree in development study. Mr. Gisore is going to talk about the understanding of ARSO Conformity Assessment Program and Conformity Assessment Compliance methods, including testing and why it is crucial to industry, society, trade, and sustainable development. Mr. Gisore, please welcome to give us your presentation.
Thank you, Lilian, for the introduction. And let me welcome our audience to this webinar. As you have introduced the subject, I will not repeat it again. I've just mentioned, of course, ARSO as being an intergovernmental organization that most of you know. So we work as representatives of the national standards bodies that represent their governments in the continental harmonization of standards and conformity assessment. Currently, as you mentioned, of course, we have the FCFTA that is a continental free trade area that all our member states should be participating in to ensure that they can trade with one another, as well as trading with the rest of the world. That would make it. That would make it.
Can you put please your presentation in the presentation mode?
It is presentation mode from my end, unless there's some problem.
Oh.
Probably, I repeat it again. Let me just reopen.
Yes.
Is it appearing okay?
Not yet.
Not
Maybe
yet.
we can do it at our end. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Maybe then can you help us to present from our side?
Yeah, you can try. I've sent the presentation, so it should be possible to do that, but he has to move quite fast. Do you have it? All right, try. Okay, you have it. There you have it. Okay, so as I was mentioning, I was actually on this slide. So that we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, and part of the reasons that we are also emphasizing on harmonization of standards and conformity assessment is because we want to ensure that our African countries can participate in trading with one another as well as trading with external countries, that is globally. If you can move. So for ARSO, the core mandates, and this is why I highlighted that in red, is that we are, as an organization, supposed to coordinate and promote standardization and conformity assessment, as well as operating a regional certification marking scheme with a view to promoting African products for trade in the continent. Can move. Now, for purposes of understanding the conformity assessment, we are looking at techniques which demonstrate that specified requirements relating to a product, process, system, person, or body are fulfilled. Now, these activities ensure that the product or process are meeting what the obligations that they are supposed to meet, and that the conformity assessment provides a means of ensuring that product, services, systems, or bodies have certain required characteristics, that these characteristics are consistent from the product, service, or system to system. And they verify that a standard or technical specification has been applied for the purpose that it is intended to be applied for, and therefore it meets those expectations for either providing a service or providing the securing of certain properties, or producing or being an input to producing final products that are expected to be used with specific rules, and then they are applied in a consistent and replicable manner. Next. So these ones have been mentioned, that the various types or aspects of conformity assessment include inspection, they include certification, they include assessment, they include auditing, examination, and testing. Those are the aspects that you will look at. If you're talking about conformity assessment, you should be able to remember those 6 aspects that are mentioned. Next. So the types, I'm happy that Lillian has preempted this, as I don't want to repeat them again, so that you know there's first party, there is second party, there's third party. And in most cases, you find that what is considered to be more objective in terms of assurance that goods or services have been or meet the required standards. Most times when you hear of conformity assessment, you'll be talking about the third-party assessment. However, as the world is increasing in massive production, you find that we shall be moving more towards self-declaration of conformity, which is this first-party assessment. And therefore, it is for people to understand and develop the capacity to be able to make sure that they actually comply with the standards, they actually have the product tested, they understand what the market needs, they understand what the rules of the market are, and they understand that if there is any problem with the product, they are liable to prosecution, they are liable to compensation, and therefore the first party assessment will increase in significance with when the trend is increasing, when there's a lot of development happening, and a lot of responsibility being placed on those who are producing to ensure that they actually meet the standards. So for the time being, when you hear conformity assessment, we are referring to third party, because our production systems are very small, are low, and we have not yet understood the standards very well. But as we move forward, we will be moving towards the first party assessment. Let's move. Next. So this particular presentation will be emphasizing on testing. And in testing, there are quite a lot of things that happen. First of all, you are determining one or more characteristics of an object of conformity assessment according to the procedure, which is aimed at controlling variables within testing as a contribution to the accuracy or reliability of the results. So when someone tells you, for example, that the product, if it is cement, that this is the strength after you installed a product or installed a structure, the strength will be 28 megapascals. At the end of 1 week, you will need to do a test to verify that it's actually that is the strength it has before you can embark on the next. So if the strength is mentioned, if the amount of salt is mentioned, if the amount of vitamins are mentioned, you will need to test and confirm that it has been tested. If, for example, we are testing the contamination of water, or we are saying this water is safety because the microbiological limits are this level which is not harmful, we need a test to be done to confirm that what you are saying is true. And therefore, tests are done to confirm that the characteristics you are claiming are actually what they are, or they are less than that. So the product is safe, or the product is not safe. So that's that's what the testing is done to do. And many times when we are saying that a product is of high quality or low quality, the testing should be the one that confirms to us that that product is good or it is bad, it is safe or it is not safe, it is strong or weak, and therefore it is not suitable or it is suitable for use in a particular aspect where we are applying it. So testing is the most crucial issue, or the most crucial aspect of conformity assessment, in ensuring that what we claim, or what the person selling is claiming, is actually claiming the right characteristics. You have all seen where people claim that the performance of their product is very high, but they do not show you the results from a laboratory that can confirm to you that indeed it has been tested and that performance is verified by that testing. Even then, that testing, you need to confirm that the laboratory has the capability, has the competence, and it has been accredited to do that kind of testing. Now, test methods come as single documents that are tailored to do that testing. As you can see as an example, when we are talking about non-destructive testing, and then you are testing the penetrant materials, or they can come as part of the specification, because most times when you find a product standard, it will have aspects of testing embedded in the standard. Next. Next slide. So areas of testing that are crucial. We always make sure that food and feed, quality and safety, integrity, wholeness, or their safety is assured at end stage of production, processing, and distribution, including rules aimed at ensuring fair practices in trade and protecting consumer interests and information. So for food, there is no option. You can't put your food in the market if you actually don't have them tested and verified that they are safe. There's also the aspect of animal health and welfare requirements. Those are areas that we need to make sure that they are tested. Requirements for placing on the market and use of plant protection products and sustainable use of pesticides. These are also products that you ensure that they are tested and confirmed. Safety, quality, and efficacy of machines and equipment are very essential, that you don't want machines that are not safe in the market. Industrial products, it's electrical, mechanical, biological, chemicals, etc. These are also tested. Medical devices and medicinal products, very important areas. There's no option, you have to test this. Building and civil engineering materials, tools, equipment, or facilities. We all know what happens when they are not tested. So for example, cement is not tested. Tools are not working properly. We have buildings collapsing. Then environmental requirements, anything that you discuss into the environment and that's not decomposed or it causes contamination is also important. Then packaged products need to be tested. Authentication of products for prevention of fraudulent and deceptive practices, very key. Then the issues of minerals, petrochemicals, and fuel products, including the evaluation of value-added products. So these are areas that we find that testing is very important and has to be done as a rule. Next. So this, at the international level, we have what we call the Casco Toolbox. And in this, it gives us guidance on what kind of conformity assessment needs to be done at what level. And in this, they show, for example, the conformity assessment of suppliers. We have the ISO 17050, which is self-declaration of conformity. Then we have peer assessment, which is ISO 17040. Then we have requirements for accreditation of bodies. That is 17011. We have mutual recognition, guide 68. We have a guide, a code of good practice in conformity assessment, 17060. Then we have testing bodies. When you are looking at testing bodies, 17025 for laboratories, which are dealing with testing and calibration. We have proficiency testing, 17043, management systems, which are also used. Either you are talking about food systems and all that. 17024 dealing with certification of persons, and then products and services under 17065 as well as 17067. So that toolbox is what guides most of the conformity assessment practices that we have globally or at the national level and regionally. Next. So in line with the requirements of this continent, we also have at the African level what we call ARSO Conformity Assessment Program, ACAP, which is intended to provide confidence to interested third parties that goods and services produced in Africa fulfill specified requirements. So when we produce goods in this continent, we need to make sure that we actually meet the standards. And standards are not strange, as we always tell people. Standards are not strange to the African continent. Standards started in the African continent, whereby you'll find that any product you are taking to the market, yourselves will make sure that it is attractive, that it is something that you can actually sell, that it is something that people will pay for a certain amount of money. This is embedded in all of us, those who have taken products to the market. We all understand the characteristics. Those who don't, and they go to the market with any type of product, you always see them coming back with them or throwing them by the roadside because they didn't understand what the market needed. So the means by which we do this is by a dedicated certification system scheme and implementing certification of specific recognized standards to facilitate trade between African countries, as well as exporting out of the continent. That is the ARSO African ACAP, which is the conformity assessment system of the African continent. Next. So what are the aspects? What are the objectives? The objectives are to provide for an African certification system for goods and services produced in accordance with African standards issued by ARSO. This can be indigenous standards produced within the continent or international standards which are endorsed by ARSO to improve the quality, safety, and legality of goods and services in Africa, to facilitate intra-African and global trade, to establish a third-party assessment program to increase transparency and credibility of the stakeholders on certified ARSO products, and then to provide a forum for collaboration in certification activities in the African region with a view to affording mutual benefits to all who are participating in the scheme, and to facilitate the value addition as well as ensuring that we have harmonization and independent verification. Next. So this is a conformity assessment system. If you look at it, you'll find some level of resemblance to the ARSO toolbox, but this is now ours that is a practical system. Now in this system, you'll see that part of it, it has the accreditation aspect. And in this accreditation aspect, we have the AFRAC, that is the African Accreditation Corporation, and the accreditation bodies that at the national level that are under AFRAC. Now, the ARSO Secretariat is the scheme owner of the African Conformity Assessment System. And in that, we have the advisory committee, which is ensuring governance, ensuring impartiality and appeals, and it has oversight on the certification processes. Then we have the standards management committee to ensure that the standards that we use follow the right processes. and then the ACAB scheme, that is the African Conformity Assessment scheme, with specific requirements. Now, in these specific requirements, we have bodies like inspection bodies that will be accredited to actually carry out the inspection. Then we have testing laboratories, and we have certification bodies. So this is the architecture of the African Conformity Assessment program to ensure that it's a credible structure that complies with the standards, as you can see in the next slide. Next. In this slide, we have mentioned the standards that are actually used. For the rules of certification bodies, we have 17065. That's the international standard. For purpose of for those bodies conforming, carrying out audit and certification of management systems, we have 17021. And then for the laboratories, we have ISO IC 17025. For those that are dealing with qualification of auditors, we have 17024. And then the scheme is designed using the provisions of ISO IC 17067, which gives us guidance on what kind of schemes you can develop. So this scheme also follows the particular requirements from the International Accreditation Forum, which deals with evaluation of conformity assessment schemes. So to ensure that when you hear of African Conformity Assessment Program, you are not thinking of something that is watered down so that we can appear to be meeting standards. It is tailored in accordance with international standards, is competitive, is equivalent and the same or even better in some cases with schemes existing elsewhere. So don't go for it because you think it is cheaper or it is lower. It's actually an internationally benchmarked scheme that can meet any requirements that are expected at the international level. Next. So the overall implementation of this is that ARSO is the scheme owner and therefore is responsible for the administration of the scheme. And ARSO works with accreditation bodies to ensure that if it is certification bodies, they are accredited by a recognized accreditation body. And in Africa, we do have quite a good number of accreditation bodies that are internationally recognized. The conformity assessment bodies involved in the scheme, that is testing laboratories, inspection bodies, product certification bodies, and all those are assessed by the accreditation bodies, which are recognized or are under the AFRAC recognition framework. Next. So what is the need for this? As we've said, it is to promote the social and economic development of the continent, by offering a conformity assessment system to underpin the quality and value addition of goods and services produced and traded in the continent. Many of the existing certification schemes, you'll find they are actually not owned in the continent, or they are private owned and are expensive to access by many stakeholders in the continent. Always, this has been the problem where you hear that certification in the continent is expensive because the certification schemes are not owned by the bodies in the continent. But more importantly, it is to build the capacity of the local or African conformity assessment bodies, and then to form the basis for mutual recognition of conformity assessment results across the continent to enhance intra-African trade under the FCFT or other schemes. We also need to evolve a conformity assessment scheme which is focused on priority sectors in the continent to support our own flagship development programs, and to evolve an internationally benchmarked scheme while taking into account the specific experiences of Africa and addressing the unique challenges that we face in the continent. So we are looking at what is it we want, and you can recall in the recent past when a lot of challenges come and we need to sort out issues, we really need to make sure that the schemes exist that can assist us not to struggle a lot. Next. So the schemes that we have currently include primary production, which is in an area that we all know the continent excels a lot. That's agricultural production. We have a food safety management system certification schemes. We have a chain of custody. And then we have the African Ecomark, which is sustainability and eco-labeling. We have African traditional medicine. We have sustainable capture fisheries. We have good finance grant practice. And then we have cosmetology and wellness. In this one, we have a lot of these issues of beauty, hair care, skin care, all those things. And then we have sustainable mining, which is upcoming. We have ecological organic agriculture certification scheme. We are Made in Africa certification scheme. And currently we are working on good research management practice, which shall be mainly operating within universities and research organizations. Next. So to run this, we do have what we call the African Conformity Assessment Committee, ARSO Conformity Assessment Committee, which was established in 2013. And this has the following structure that it has. The first subcommittee deals with standards implementation. And under that, we have a working group dealing with governance issues to ensure that policy and governance issues are addressed to make sure that we have credibility. Then we have product and sustainability certification schemes, services, African traditional medicine, and market surveillance and inspection. The second technical subcommittee deals with technical regulations. And in this, we are looking at, for example, crops and plant protection, animal resources, infrastructure, building and construction, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices. The latter, that is the number 5, has been very active during the COVID time in providing guidelines in the pharmaceuticals and medical devices area to ensure that we address those aspects that are very important for the health and safety of the people, providing manufacturing practices and healthcare services that are crucial to the people during emergencies and during routine times. So these have been working quite well. Next. My final slide is the one that asks us, or it's one that tries to put into perspective, what do we need? We know laboratories are expensive. And therefore, we need to look at interregional testing laboratories network architecture. And in this, we are looking at laboratories that are able to perform testing not only in the territories where they are based, but they can do testing for other countries, because establishing a laboratory for a small economy is very expensive. So this is a model under consideration currently. The regional integrated laboratory system is optimized to serve the needs of both of the national and regional market, while operating at a considerably lower cost than that of an equal number of separate national laboratories. So it can be established to operate for a group of countries. It supports the delivery of timely, high quality and interpretable results for all users of the laboratory services. The network facilitates laboratory communication and information flows. It provides mutual recognition and sharing of resources. The laboratory network creates an inclusive forum for laboratory experts from member states to share ideas, work collaboratively, and build relationships that will support a more effective integrated response to emerging issues. The scopes of testing performed by such laboratories are based on harmonized test methods or common approaches adopted in the particular sector. The scopes should be precisely and unambiguously defined to focus on the mandate that they have been given. So that is the model that is being worked on. We will be giving updates much later on when the realization is achieved, so that we are able to provide these services at a lower cost. I thank you very much for listening. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Didi, for this detailed and insightful presentation. We have learned a lot in regard to the role ARSO, in regard to the conformity assessment at the continental level. We learned more different or key area that testing that need to be done, and more importantly now, how the ARSO Conformity Assessment Program are aligned to different international best practices. Thank you so much. But Tidi, if you allow, I would like to ask one question for the interest of time. We would like to hear more on how we can resolve the challenges of different testing procedures within the continent, referencing to the benefits of mutual recognition arrangements and the use of harmonized system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's why I was giving the hint in the last slide that one of the things that we need to do is to ensure that we harmonize the methods of test that we are using, so that our laboratories also use the same methods of test. They are accredited, and the mandate on what they can test is well understood. In the past, we used to have academic arguments that a laboratory can use any method of test as long as they can validate that method. But then you realize that if people are going to be using different methods of test, they can't achieve the same results. Methods of test have their own levels of uncertainty, and this may not be exactly the same, and therefore you are unlikely to get the same results if you do not use the same types of methods of test. And therefore it's important that our laboratories actually use the same methods of test. They also need to participate in proficiency testing using the same matrices so that they are able to show that they can actually achieve the same results, or results that can make it possible for mutual recognition. So those are some of the aspects that we are looking at, ensuring that these laboratories have access to, the same reference materials, the same types of methods of test. They participate in, those interlaboratory comparisons and proficiency testing. That way, they can then have mutual recognition being possible. Thank you. You are muted, Lillian.
Sorry, thank you so much for the clarification. And I was saying that for those who would like to get more details, can still send their question over the chats. So let us move to the next panelist, who is going to talk about the standard and conformity assessment procedures, testing against specific standards as a tool for supporting manufacturers' self-declaration of conformity to purchaser specification or government regulation and quality assurance, benefits and challenges of the SMEs. Allow me to invite Mr. Wesley Aondo from Cotecna. But briefly, I would like to give a brief introduction. Mr. Wesley is the country manager, Kenya, and the regional verification of certification manager for East and Southern Africa at Cotecna, and has over 20 experience in the testing, inspection, and certification industry. Welcome, Mr. Wesley. The floor is yours.
Hello.
Yes, please. We can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. The meeting just got disconnected for some reason. I don't know. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening to me. And apologies in advance for any background noises. I'm in transit, and therefore there's a bit of, those good noises that come when you're in transit. Allow me to share my screen, and if you can be able to see it, please let me know. Then I can continue with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, we can see the presentation, but we'd like to request that you put in the presentation mode, please.
It is in presentation mode as we speak right now. Please confirm.
Sure. Not on our side. Maybe there's a challenge. We can help you at our end.
Okay, fantastic.
Then please.
Just give me a minute.
Then do you have
Okay.
the presentation from Mr. Wesley?
Okay.
So Wesley, for the interest of time, maybe you can continue.
Yes, that's okay. You can take the next
Able
person,
to
then I
see,
can. Yeah, that's okay. Correct. No problem. Thank you.
No, I mean, you can continue.
You can do the next panelist then as I prepare to send it to Philip, and then you can share it with the rest of the team. Thank you.
Okay, kindly send it to Mr. Dan. He will share with you the email in the chat box. Yeah, thank you. We apologize for the inconvenience of the technology. Let us move to the next presenter. We'll be having Mr. Douglas Nyamori from the Intertech. Douglas is the East African Region Manager for the Intertech GTS. He has over 20 years of experience in conformity assessment industry and has been involved in implementation of various programs in the region designed to facilitate trade by assisting compliance with standards and securing the international supply chain. He's going to share his insights on the world measurement system, traceability chain, and measurement uncertainties, the role of testing in conformity assessment in promoting market access and trade in the context of FCFTA. Welcome, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, ARSO team. Let me share my screen. I hope my slideshow will also work.
We hope so.
Okay, so mine is on presentation mode. If you're having this struggle, I would assume it's from its ability to use Zoom. Is it okay now?
Noted, we don't have yet your presentation on the screen.
Okay, 1 minute. Just give me 1 minute. Is that okay, Lillian?
We can see the presentation, but still not in the presentation mode. Please try.
All right.
Or you, if not, you
It's
can
on
increase
presentation
the
mode
size.
from my end.
From your end. Oh.
Yeah.
Would you mind please sharing your presentation with us via email so that we can do the presentation? Yes.
It's already shared with Philip.
It's unfortunate that we are not with Philip. He's not around. We can maybe share with my email.
Okay, 1 second.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Douglas, have you shared?
Yes, I have just sent it.
Mm.
It should be on your inbox now. Please confirm as soon as you have it. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Lillian.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And my apologies for the delay. My appreciation to you, ARSO team, Dr. Nsengimana and the team there for allowing us to be part of this webinar, and welcome our participants. I hope you will find our presentation helpful and informative. So my aim today is to try and share with you a little bit of what our experience has been, and my thoughts about the role of testing in promoting trade and market access in the context of AFCTA. I am based here in Nairobi, and thank you for the introduction, Lydia. Next slide. So I will begin by sharing a bit about what we do in terms of conformity-based, consignment-based conformity assessment, which really drives access of goods to markets and to build trust. We believe that trust is really the key to the successful flow of trade. When there's trust built, then goods move freely. So the process of conformity assessment then demonstrates that a product meets the relevant requirements that would be probably stated in standards, regulations, contracts, programs, or other normative documents. It is indeed then an integral part of the administration of technical regulations and standard. We have been doing quite a number of conformity-based consignment assessment programs in Africa, at least in over 12 countries so far. And with this background, then testing has been one of the very key aspects, and both as a challenge and as an opportunity for promoting of trade. So, of course, CBCA is intended to ensure that imported products, so products moving across borders, meet the health, safety, and environmental standards of the countries they are being moved to, facilitating trade so that there are green channels, between countries, and then therefore easing the costs of movement, because a lot of costs are also incurred in delays that are there because of checks. And then we are also therefore assisting in trade facilitation and through streamlining of compliance. In the process of consignment-based conformity assessment, a lot of the people then that get involved in trade become aware of standards, become more educated on technical regulations, and therefore are better placed to try and meet those requirements. Next slide. So, of course, one of the buzzwords now has been sustainability, and the need to be cognizant of need to ensure that there is sustainability in the work that we do. So conformity assessment also is playing a key role. So I'll mention this very briefly in encouraging companies to develop more sustainable products and to ensure compliance. So some of the considerations that we take in sustainable development and trade conformity assessment, for example, would be life cycle assessments, which really is to see that a product is tested to evaluate the environmental impact it's making throughout its life cycle, from raw material to disposal. And then, of course, material selection. So what are these products made of? Are they made of sustainable materials? Can these materials be recycled? Are they sourced from renewable sources? And then, of course, there is energy efficiency, testing for energy efficiency. and identifying areas of improvement, waste minimization, so evaluating the design and features of a product in order to minimize waste during the production and disposal process. So national requirements drive a lot of the need for conformity assessment. National regulatory requirements, consumer demands for safety, performance, and quality assurance, private and public authorities wanting to ensure that the scrutiny of imported or exported products for compliance. Then, of course, there's producers who have a need to provide reputable evidence that their products meet the standards that are required of regulatory and technical and other standards requirements. You do not want to be a producer who, producers want to access market, but you do not want to be a producer who has accessed markets and then you're subject to a product recall, for example, which is an expensive situation, a costly situation, and is also damaging to reputation. So some of the things that are promoting testing as a need for access of market in FCTA include that. African countries then are confronted with a need and a challenge to improve on the quality of regulation. Not only the quality of products, but the quality of regulation. So just go back a slide, please, Lilian. I know it's moving by itself very quickly. Yeah, just the challenge of improving the quality of regulation so that the non-tariff measures and technical barriers to trade are overcome so that you're able to deliver competitively to markets. The FCTA agreement definitely has massive potential, seeing that it is involving a potential free market for 55 African countries. Next slide, please. So zeroing in on testing and the role of accredited testing laboratories. We all know that accredited testing laboratories are here to provide impartial assurance that, that both the test methods and results can be relied upon. So there's accuracy, there's use, of course, of calibrated equipment, there's use of qualified and competent staff, there's traceability that is provided, therefore, by the results of these tests in terms of the test certificates or reports that are provided, and there's authenticity that can be checked and validity of such tests. Over the period that we have been working in conformity assessment, some of the challenges that we have faced, and I know Ruben alluded to some of them, is lack of sufficient in-country testing laboratories. And even when they are there, of course, sometimes there's a limited scope of testing. And then, of course, there's a big issue with the costs of testing. These costs sometimes are related to the product you're testing, or sometimes the wide variety of parameters that are subject to the testing. And so these costs can be quite limiting, and sometimes traders would then shy off from moving their goods if they feel that the costs would be prohibitive. And then, of course, there are differences in standards and technical regulations. So your goods meet maybe your in-country requirements, but do not meet the requirements of another country. And of course, these are measures that can be mitigated, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. I added one more, falsification of test reports. So, of course, not everybody in trade is honest, as all of us were in this meeting. But this sometimes is a challenge. But this can, of course, be addressed by digitalization and traceability of test reports. And then, of course, there is the ever-changing and progressive product design and product development that has to be met and acknowledged in standards development and in technical regulations. So how do we overcome these challenges? Next slide. So, of course, these are some of the things that we would do. Make every effort to eliminate unnecessary and unjustifiable technical barriers to trade through Of course, adopting and harmonized standards. ARSO is at the forefront of doing this. Where possible, promoting the use of relevant international standards, identifying and assessing instruments of trade facilitation, recognizing equivalence of technical regulations, of course, and involving metrology, accreditation, and conformity assessment, strengthening cooperation and harmonization, developing and implementing capacity building programs, which this to an extent is one of those things that we are doing in this webinar. Capacity building programs go a long way. Collaboration with third-party conformity assessment bodies, both private and public. And then, yeah, just promoting recognition, harmonizing marks of quality. These are not impossible things. These are things that we can achieve. A cooperation in accreditation, and promoting African accreditation bodies. So those are some of the things that we could do. So some of the things that Intertech is involved in presently, and I'll say this very quickly, is, as I said, mentioned earlier, is in running 12 programs within the continent, supporting governments in their conformity assessment needs, supporting exporters have a clear understanding of what their respective regulatory requirements are and therefore we have developed portals where we can assist in expediting product market access. And in our engagements with standards bodies, we are also now providing support and feedback in standards development, not just support, but feedback based on experience on several different standards from different regions. So conformity assessment practices obviously then would support developing countries in creating a level playing field. This is what is really needed, creating a level playing field for trade in preparing for the AFCTA. And testing is at the core. Testing is at the core of this, and then testing to standards that are agreed upon as and test methods that are agreed upon and accredited. Next slide. So that's just a quick visual of some of the programs that we are involved in globally. Most of them are in Africa. There are quite a number in the Middle East as well. And then the next slide is just a quick visual, a very quick visual of our coverage. Intertech is a UK headquartered company. It's a FTSE 100 UK headquartered company with over 40,000 employees, over 3,000 auditors, found in over 100 countries. We have over 1,000 labs and offices, obviously spread out in the globe, able to speak different languages. Thank you, Lillian. I think that's the last slide. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Douglas, for your good presentation. I think we have learned a lot in regard to Intertech services in regard to the conformity assessments. Please allow me to get more clarity on how the Intertech services contributes to building trust for African traders, SMEs, and producers. That's one question. And the second one is, how does Intertech address critical requirements and challenges related to measurement, system traceabilities, and measurement of uncertainties? Thank you for shedding more lights on those two questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the things that I mentioned, Lillian, on building trust is the process of conformity assessment and the various techniques that we make available. One of those techniques that I didn't elaborate on is product type testing and the process of registration and licensing of exporters and their goods and products, so that they are recognized across different countries. one of the activities that we've undertaken to do is to provide a global licensing of products after successful testing and successful registration, so that you are able to build trust. So that those products then, when they go to the new markets, are recognized as conforming. So that builds trust over a period of time. Lillian, on the second question, please, would you ask me again?
So the second question was how Intertech address critical requirement and challenges related to testing, measurement, system traceability, and measurement of uncertainties.
All right. I will speak to traceability more than I would speak to measurement uncertainties because I'm not the expert on measurement uncertainties. But traceability is really what we've done with traceability is digitalization. So, and not just us, but I think number one, in going into a paperless trade and having access to portals where you can access certificates of conformity, trace, test reports, have test reports that have clear information from manufacturer to brand, and to of course, the results of such tests. Then you can be able to have authenticity, you can trace back, and you can have then confidence in the results of the conformity assessment that have thus been undertaken. I hope I've answered part of your question, Lillian.
Yes, thank you so much. But we have different experts around during this webinar, or they can also intervene through different the chat box, give their thought and insights in regard to that question.
Absolutely.
To share, it's share, yeah. Here we are here to share different experience and different practices. So you all welcome to give your insight on the same. Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
Thanks. Thanks, Lillian.
We can now move to our next panelist. I think Mr. Wesley is now ready. Hello?
Ahead and do the presentation.
Hello?
And thank you again for your... Yes, hello?
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Bonjour à tous. So my presentation starts now. Thank you for presenting.
So Wesley, if you allow, I think maybe I need to remind our audience on who you are, just briefly, because they might not be remembering where you are coming from. Members, allow me again to introduce to you Mr. Wesley Awondo from Cotecna. He's the country manager, Kenya, and the regional verification for certification manager for East Southern Africa at Cotecna. And he has over 20 years of experience in testing, inspection, and certification industry. Welcome again, Mr. Wesley. You can now take us through your presentation.
Thank you very much. To be introduced twice, I think, is an honor. So I take that as a compliment, despite the technical problems. Let's go to the next slide, please. So today's presentation is quite a mouthful, really. Testing against specific standards as a tool for supporting manufacturers with self-declarations of conformity to purchaser specifications or government regulations and quality assurance. That's such a long statement, and then coupled with benefits and challenges for SMEs. So it's quite a unique topic, and to dissect it properly, you'll probably need 50 slides or maybe 100 slides, but I'll try and do that in maybe a few slides and in the interest of time. Let's go to the next slide. I think go to slide number 6 in the interest of time, if you don't mind. As I continue to just mention quickly that Cotecna is one of the world's leading inspection companies, a TSE company. We also are involved in conformity assessment and inspections and CBCA in the African continent and also in the Middle East, and also in other areas where we come in to do a lot of CBCA work or conformity assessment work, similar to Intertech, but I think we are a bit agile than them. Douglas, how are you? So we have been involved in conformity assessment for the past 50 years and still growing. So in this particular presentation, let's just perhaps start with the basics of standards and conformity assessment, which was brought about and I think was discussed quite well by Lilian and Mr. Gisore about standards and conformity assessment. So the standards, they are these guidelines that have been documented with a particular operational process and procedure to ensure that a product meets some safety, some quality requirements. And why they matter is because they ensure that there is a level playing field in the market, because everyone can decide that my way is the best way. But no, let's have a way that is standard for everyone within some certain requirements and parameters. Conformity assessment, I think, has been spoken a lot here, but it's good to understand in terms of conformity assessment how it looks like, some of the types that are there, and I think it was alluded to and also explained that you have a first party, which is self-declaration, which we're going to talk about a little bit more now. There's a second party, which is customer audits that come in terms of soft lines and consumer products that you go and do a second party, or a buyer comes and audits and facility to make sure that they meet their own buyer's requirements, so to speak. And then third party certification, which comes from either certification bodies, CABs, or through accredited laboratories, through various jurisdictions that are put in place. Next slide, please. And of course, this also helps in terms of just making sure that environmental aspects are covered and are taken care of as part and parcel of conformity assessment. So there's an element of testing that has been brought about. And why testing? Testing, I think we can never belabor the word testing when it comes to conformity assessment, because this procedure is one that helps to at least give us that verification, that confidence that this product or even a system meets some certain standards that have been put together, or regulations and safety requirements. So conformity assessment, whether it's a procedure that has been put in place or a methodology, is critical because of testing purposes. And in terms of SMEs, and in context of the African continent where we are, some key essential areas are very critical when it comes to testing of SMEs. Number one, performance testing. Performance testing for SMEs will be critical because you want to tell us that this product actually is what it is advertised as, not a pass-off of something else or a counterfeit of something else. It is exactly what it is, what you've declared it is. So performance testing in terms of that particular product, just essential requirements, of course, of SMEs. Remember, we're looking in the context of SMEs. Two is a safety testing, which is what? Fitness for use. Is it going to do what you have said it's going to do? Is this food safe? Is it free of any pathogens? Can we be sure of that? Are there any malfunctions of this particular wheelbarrow that you have created or manufactured, so to speak? Are there any safety concerns, environmental concerns? Does it create environmental issues rather than being maybe carbon neutral, as it were? Any sustainability issues or concerns out of it? Just part of safety testing. And then, of course, compliance testing. This is where now regulatory authorities and governments come into place and say, listen, we have a standard for this particular product that has come up. And also, with what ARSO is doing with regional standards, can say, we have a standard for this. Why don't you use this particular standard to make sure that your goods actually conform? So those kind of like key essential testing for SMEs. And of course, next slide, please. Various regimes have got jurisdictions for various regimes. So, it could be a CBCA, it could be one which is goods are going to be inspected and tested at destination. So there are many regimes that are usually used for import, for instance, that can be used in terms of that testing. So in the area of self-declaration of conformity, of manufacturer self-declaration of a conformity, what is it in the first place? Do we even understand what it is? Now, we use this a lot, especially when it comes to some part of CBCA. And why I'm saying that is because when we assessing for governments, for goods that are being imported to various jurisdictions, various countries, we also do a lot of CBCAs in the African market, as I mentioned before. is that there's some people who are not coming from a place where they have their own internal laboratories. There are companies that have got their internal laboratories and they can be able to give you their own declaration, but others don't have. So why is it important to have this self-declaration? First and foremost, it's what? It's a statement that you give, or a manufacturer gives, or even a supplier gives, to say that their product meets the safety, regulatory, and technical standards, and therefore might not require a third-party certification, because they're basically declaring this is what we are, this is who we are. In a very simple analogy is to say, if you are coming to say that your name is Wesley and you're presenting your papers to someone, then there should be something that backs that up. And the backing up should be either, it's a passport or something like that to identify who you are. So extrapolate that to a product, and a manufacturer or a supplier say, I'm supplying printer toners to you as my person who's being supplied to, and someone who's coming to check, third party would say, can you show me that these printers are actually going to fit the purpose, going to do the job they're going to do? Then you can say, forget even about that. I have a declaration to tell you that what I am saying is correct. What I'm saying is true, and these products can meet the requirements. So it's a self-declaration of conformity. And that means that the manufacturer or the supplier has taken time to do sufficient testing in their own way, whether they have the internal laboratories or they've used third-party laboratories sometimes, to confirm that and to support their claim that the products actually meet those requirements. So they maybe have internal QC reports, tests, risk assessments. They could have maybe trials. They could be clinical trials. They could be soil trials, and technical documentation to back it up and to say, yes, what we are saying is true. And then the manufacturer or the supplier then takes responsibility for compliance, so that an external certification body can look at it and say, okay, you've taken the responsibility, so therefore we can take your word for it, okay? So in a nutshell, that's what a self-declaration of conformity is. So the manufacturer comes and declares based on what they believe they've been able to achieve with regards to product conformity. Some of the self-declaration examples that we have is like for the CE marking in Europe. You see most of the products have a CE marking. That CE marking means that someone has gone to an extent of making sure their products comply, and they have technical documentations, they've done all the risk assessments and whatever that needs to be done from a QC perspective to ensure that the goods actually comply to the European standards, whatever the standard that is. So CE marking, you've seen that. In some cases, we have like medical devices for class 1, thermals, bandages, etc., can be self-declared as compliant before entering the market. So that supplier or manufacturer will find that they have maybe a medical QMS at the backdrop and a technical specification to give them that confidence to come and say, by the way, our bandages, our thermometers actually meet the requirements that are needed. Sometimes vehicle manufacturers have the same thing. They come and tell you, we have an IATF standard, it's a technical standard for vehicles, but also we say that our cars meet the emission standards. We have tested them fully, so you don't even have to test them. We just trust us. We are either Mercedes-Benz or Toyota. When we tell you what we are saying is true. So that's how a self-declaration basically is defined. Next slide, please. So therefore, when you look at it from the point of self-declaration for manufacturers and suppliers, is that, next slide, please. People who are importing or exporting then can be told to say, if you are importing these particular goods and give a self-declaration that can be attested and can be verified, then it can stand in as a documentation that can be used to show that these products actually comply. Some of the benefits of self-declaration of conformity is that you have faster market access for some regions, especially like in Europe, for the CE marking, and in other areas like in the US, when you have complied with some of the FDA rules and FCC rules, you can actually have faster market access based on the self-declaration, because they expect that you have done some background checks and background technical details before you come and say you have this self-declaration. Okay. Also, it reduces certification costs, because again, it means that for an SME, for instance, you don't have to now think about, I need to look for a third-party CB or CAB to come and do some certification process, etc. I can be able to do this by myself and be able to attest and stand on it. And then flexibility in compliance means that now you can be able to even pace yourself not based on a schedule that has been given by a third party, but you as a manufacturer or a supplier. But it's also risky. It's also risky because it increases liability, because at the end of the day, you're still the one who is responsible. In case of anything, then you're more responsible because there's no other third party that has come to basically critically analyze and say, yes, we actually understand this particular product, we have checked it, etc. There could be some potential market barriers if they don't have any third party validation. So those are some of the things that could, in a way, bring risks when it comes to self-declaration. Next slide, please. Now, the other element about the question that was posted and the topic for this discussion is about government regulations and the QC. Basically, in brief, is that in many countries, there are these regulations for compliance, importation, and even local manufacture, all right? You've talked about CE marking now, you've talked about FDA, talked about EMC compatibility for some small electrical items, like in Asia and in Far East and even in Europe, where they say it must be EMC compatible, electromagnetic compatibility, sorry for that. And in Africa, in some jurisdictions, we have the quality marks. It could be an import mark, it could be a standards mark, it could be a local production mark that is given, or even if it's between the WTO TBT arranged programs. So those are regulations that are brought in for QC and QC, so that the two of them kind of like work hand in hand together. So for the SME, to comply with government regulations and the QC that has been brought as a result of regulations that are put by government, is that, of course, the legal comfort and the risk reduction. What we've spoken about the risk before now is reduced because you're actually complying to government regulations, which they've told you, this is the way, walk ye in it. But also there's product credibility, because it means that you're complying to a particular standard that has been set by the government itself. And then if the government has said this is a standard you should work with, or the regional body would say, then consumers would probably have that trust of saying, yes, I think this is the one, let's go for it, that acceptance. And also in cross-border trade, especially in areas where we have regional blocks, economic blocks, East African Community, ECOWAS, SADC, etc. So you can have an advantage in cross-border trades just because of complying with government regulations. So you can see it's like a seesaw in terms of government regulations vis-a-vis self-declaration of conformity. Next slide, please. And that then brings the challenge that SMEs would face in terms of, if you look at it from a balance point, government regulation, policies, and plans kind of give you that comfort, but that comfort also means that there'll be higher testing costs and certification costs. I'm glad Mr. Gisore said that you're thinking about like a regional laboratory where cost of testing can be reduced and made affordable for most SMEs. That will be a good plus for some of the people who want to comply. If there are multiple regulatory requirements, it becomes very complex. Exporting from country A to country B and country C, everyone is coming up with their own ideas about product standard requirements. Maybe not the test method, but the requirements and the limits then becomes a problem. That's why now ARSO, with the regional standard, can help to galvanize that free trade in Africa. Limited technical expertise and resources. Most SMEs usually suffer from this a lot. And you find that the people who are supposed to be in charge of QC are not the ones who have good technical expertise to actually push the narrative of QC of the products forward. And then they need to just updating of the standards to know what is current, what is new, because standards also evolve and change. But some of the ways to mitigate this is to see if government can support and fund programs. We say this a lot in Africa, that we must support. The government can also come in, and regional bodies can come in and support. It's important because it helps to just mitigate some of the costs. Third-party consultants, I think something we've seen people use a lot of third-party consultants to try and mitigate in terms of trying to get a certification or accreditation for that matter. Industry associations is another way of SMEs to come in, be part of an industry association. Then in that big umbrella body, then find a way to just get in and get assistance from maybe people who are part of the association. And scalable QS systems. Next slide, please. Because the scalable QS systems will help you to now grow from one step to another and to another. So in a nutshell, that is what we tried to answer the question that was very, very long with many ideas, but in a nutshell, to show how self-declaration of conformity for manufacturers can actually help in one way, but also another side can also be a problem with regards to compliance. Next slide, and thank you very much. That's the end of my slide. Back to you, Lillian.
Thank you so much, Wesley, for the nice presentation. I think you have provided more information, additional information on different conformity assessment procedural techniques that are there. And I also noted the different challenges and also a recommendation on how we can resolve those different challenges. But Wesley, if you allow, I have an additional question in regard to how you work with the SMEs or different conformity assessment bodies. I believe from the 50 years that you have now since the establishment of COTECNA, you have faced or interacted with different traders, SMEs, manufacturers, and you have come across with different challenges, or in practical way, what are different challenges that they are facing, and how is COTECNA helping them to solve those different issues in regard, of course, with the conformity assessment procedures?
Okay, thank you very much. We worked with many SMEs. I'll pick one practical example. I hope that we may be able to give context. We have a client that we're working with in Ethiopia, and they are using solar products. They are in the solar business, renewable energy. Let me use that word. It's a technical word. And one of the challenges they had is to fast track and find out how their products that they want to manufacture within Ethiopia, importing raw materials to Ethiopia to manufacture, and be able to compile and to put together that particular product to be tested and to comply with international standards, how that can be done. And yet they're a small player, and yet they want to still use that particular facility as a manufacturing unit to distribute to the various regions in Ethiopia and also in the Horn of Africa, as it were. So how we come in is we help in terms of testing of the products from the initial source and source supplier verification. So it's almost like an audit system for them, supplier verification, and inspection, and then the final product for testing. Now, in terms of testing, then we say testing is very, very expensive for some of these products, especially renewable energy products. So what we try to do is to meet them at a point where they say, what are the essential requirements that are needed to make sure that this product actually meets the requirements? Because if you test sometimes according to a whole standard, you have like 50 parameters to test in one particular standard. And some of them could be not essential in terms of safety, in terms of operation, in terms of reliability, based on all the key elements that I mentioned there. So based on just removing the essential requirements, we're able to give a client a report that they can start using as a basis to build on slowly by slowly as they build up their compliance picture. One day, 1 year from now, or 2 years from now, the same client will come and say, look at my compliance photo. My compliance picture is that I started with 3 essential requirements tested. Now I have 40 of them that have been tested over a period of time. So that gives the comfort of an SME that they can be able to go on a slow, slowly by slowly, lentement as they call it in French, so that you're able to build and get something that is bigger at the end of the day. Now, one day when they present a report to a CB, then they can have something that is credible and can be accepted by all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wesley. I will not be able to ask many questions because of the time, but we inviting our audience to present their questions through chat for more clarity and understanding on what you do at COTECNA. Thank you so much. Members, we invite you to share your questions with our panelists while we still have them around. Now we are going to our 4th panelist. We are having Dr. Erin Crowley from AOC. She's going to talk about the benefits of evaluating the credibility, reliability, accuracy of testing solutions, and the role of AOC in the context of standard method performance requirements and the AOC test standards. Briefly, Dr. Erin Crowley is a former president of AOC International and currently Chief Scientific Officer at Q Laboratories, in the Cincinnati, Ohio, where she oversees all aspects of research and development, method validation, and technical expertise for the food safety industry. Dr. Erin, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lillian. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great. And thank you to the excellent presentations that were preceding me. I think it's a great segue into talking specifically about the ways in which AOEC can support the AFCFTA and certainly ARSO. Let me make sure you can see here. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the standards, resources, and the validated methods that that are published against the standards that AOEC is known for. So for those who may not be familiar, AOEC International was established in 1884. And while it is located here in the eastern part of the United States, it is a global organization, specifically developing global alignment of standards in food and agriculture, cosmetics, and dietary supplements, and more recently, cannabis. But really the idea is to develop or ensure food safety and product integrity through standards, the validated test assessments, and then subsequently the support of laboratory quality programs. So you may ask why AOEC is part of this discussion today, and AOEC is grateful for the joint agreement with ARSO to work collaboratively on the activities within each of the organizations on harmonization, alignment, implementation, validation of the official method standards, also specific proficiency test opportunities, and how that relates directly to the African priority sectors. So AOEC has several marks of integrity, as we mentioned, through the science program. There are standards development, resources, as well as method conformity assessment, followed by proficiency testing. So when we look at the structure that we've seen in the previous presentation, specifically with Ruben outlining the way in which ARSO is involved in the conformity assessment part of the AFCFTA, there are standard method performance requirements, otherwise known as SMPRs, and then standard guidelines. So these SMPRs are published documents specific to either a particular analyte or a particular commodity. A most recent example would be for microbial contaminants in cannabis, or microbial contaminants in produce. So the performance requirements would provide the acceptance criteria at the very minimum that would be required for a method to become an AOEC standard and an official method. And then the standard guidelines actually provide what we consider the rules or the guidebook on how to properly validate that method to meet the SMPR requirements. And so these marks that you see here on the right, those are specific to the level of validation for methods once they are validated and reviewed against the SMPR. The PTA or performance tested method is otherwise known as a single lab validation study, where that may be done in a particular technology provider's laboratory, and then repeatability is evaluated in an independent third-party lab. Or the highest level standard, which is the official method of analysis, otherwise known as OMA. And that is inclusive of the single lab validation as well as a collaboratively studied method across various countries, various laboratories, to really test the rigor and the robustness of the method to establish reproducibility. And so once the conformity assessment has been completed and the method validation the method has been certified, then proficiency testing options are available and more information can be obtained through the AOEC website, really to determine if the method that you're using in your laboratory that has been validated can in fact be performed at the same level of quality across all analysts and all levels of experience. So in the way that the ARSO technical committees are arranged, AOEC's complement to that are the scientific programs. So here along the left side, you will see programs that are specific to a particular industry need or a community of stakeholders. SPIFAN is one of its oldest programs, which is specific to standards development for infant formula and adult nutritionals. SPADA is specific to agent detection assays as it relates to testing for biothreat agents. Gluten and food allergens, really targeting some of the most critical food allergen issues, but also trying to improve the methods for these types of analytes because they are quite complex. The International Microbiological Standards is really looking at very difficult to culture or difficult to detect parasites and viruses, or in the case of water safeties, I think Ruben mentioned earlier, Legionella is one of their current activities. Botanical ingredients and dietary supplements, really ensuring that the identity verification is taken into consideration. Also trying to mitigate, adulteration. Cannabis, as I mentioned before, whether it is micro contamination, pesticide residue analysis, or even potency. And then a new program consisting of alternative protein sources, whether those are plant-based or insect-based protein sources, to establish or extend existing methods to test for the integrity of those products for nutritional labeling or contamination. So we've heard a lot about alignment and harmonization, and I had mentioned before the infant formula program is an example of that, which the rest of the slides really focus on concrete examples where harmonization has been possible. One of the most established examples of this is with Codex Alimentarius, adoption of AOEC methods specifically for sampling and analysis of infant formula. So as you see here on the particular analyte that is outlined in the Codex Standard 234, there was a global initiative that was undertaken to align AOEC methods and harmonize them through a mutual agreement with ISO, the International Dairy Federation, and in some cases, American Association of Cereal Chemists, to ensure that the methods are in fact aligned and mutually accepted for the purposes of type 2 method analysis, otherwise known as dispute resolution. So in terms of intercontinental trade and reducing barriers to trade, this is one of the most concrete examples where harmonization has been successful. Now, as it applies more to the regional or specific geographical standards development needs, AOEC is in a position to really work on this with stakeholders that or partner organizations such as ARSO to identify specific needs or specific regulatory issues or challenges that could be resolved with improved analytical methods. So AOAC does have 15 regional sections, not only in North America, but also across the globe, with the Africa section being one of the largest sections within the international sector. So some examples of where we are working to support the galvanizing of experts or subject matter experts and the resources within particular sections. This was one that was launched in November with representation, as you see there, from ARSO on developing standards for cassava products, and other food materials. And this was actually a joint effort through the Europe section, the Southeast Asia section, the Japan section, and then the Africa section, just as an example of how standards development and then subsequently conformity assessment could be possible at the continental or regional level. Another program that is an effort of multiple regional sections is pesticide residue analysis in herbs and spices. Here there is the QR code if you're interested in joining that project or learning more about it. I can also distribute the presentation. I know there was a few requests about that through the ARSO team. And here, when we talk about capacity building to really, as we say, connect the dots to the way in which standards development at AOAC is possible, is usually starting with a group of passionate stakeholders that have a need. In this case, you see here the number of initiatives that have been launched specifically by regional needs. Here we have in Malaysia, as part of the Southeast Asia section, workshops on mineral oil. In Europe, we have workshops on the launch of standards that are needed, particularly for endocrine disruptors, and using bioassays or non-targeted methods to meet this need. A more recent example with the Arab section has been with certification of halal foods. India is another one where we're working to develop standards to meet regional regulations against milk and milk product quality. And then another one that is relevant to the ARSO joint agreement would be mycotoxins in food and feed, and development of rapid assays or in-field assays with some of the third-party technology providers in the region. And just one final point before I conclude, this is just a list of some of the projects that stakeholders will be working on in 2025. Contaminants from food contact materials, vitamins in food and dietary supplements, and standardizing the test methods for those, modernizing methods for dietary fiber and other carbohydrates, produce authenticity for organic or bio certification, functional mushrooms, biostimulants in feed and fertilizer, and standardization of probiotic testing and enumeration. So with that, I thank you for your time. If you do have any additional questions, you can certainly contact me. But I also have included here direct contacts with the executive director and the chief science officer at AOAC International. And then also the weekly email updates from the AOAC Spectrum newsletter is an excellent way to keep track in real time of any activities or updates on standards development that may be relevant to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erin, for this nice presentation. I think it was a bit different from the previous one, whereby you were showing us the role of AOC in ensuring that the analytical methods that they're using in those different certificate conformity assessment procedures are reliable, accurate, and also the fit for purpose. We thank so much for the role of AOC in this. I've noted also the collaboration with other different international organizations, such as ARSO and Codex, in terms of developing standards and different standards method that we use and refer to also standards that we developed at the continental level. It's a good, really, initiative. And finally, we also notice different initiatives that you are having at AOC. We appreciate a lot this initiative on method under the herbs and spices. It's good to know and hear that, because we are also having a project in harmonization of standard in that sector. We are going to work with you further and also reference those different methods. So thank you so much. But Irene, before we leave you you leave the floor, I have a few questions to help get more clarity on the presentation. We would like to know, why is conformity assessment, especially reliable testing and test methods, are crucial for intra-African trade, global markets, and also sustainable development? Secondly, it was about the initiative. I think you have addressed them, but if our audience need more clarity on those different, how they can participate or join, they're welcome to share their comments in the chat. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Lillian. I will address the first question about conformity assessment as it relates to AOAC. And I speak not only as a volunteer with AOAC in standards development, but also as a laboratory CSO that has to make decisions about quality methods to meet our ISO accreditation. So I would say that the conformity assessment process within AOAC is critical. And there were some excellent comments in the chat that really highlight this need. So you have, the validated method that meets the conformity assessment for certification. And that method is validated in, one particular lab or a few labs, but it isn't representative of all of the ways in which methods can be modified, or where there are issues with reagent availability or equipment issues. So when I say that, the conformity assessment part of validation is important, I say that's really about, are you ensuring that if you're on a plane, is the plane operating properly? That's the method that meets the conformity assessment. In your laboratory, however, verifying that through, global standards, but also proficiency, is making sure that everyone, the pilot and the flight crew, is able to operate that plane in the same way effectively every day. And so it's really the holistic perspective of that, and making sure that they're, even with some of the older methods that have gone through the conformity assessment process, that we are regularly reviewing those to make sure that we are listing options for equipment, options for alternative options for suppliers for reagents or reference materials, because that is a critical part, not only in Africa, but globally.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost coming to the end of our webinar today. But before we close this session, I would like to invite our panelists to give us a message or a takeaway message based on different discussion we had, and also based on their presentation. What do you want that our audience can take home as a message in regard to the conformity assessment procedures? I would like to start with Mr. Ruben. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Lillian. One thing that we have to be very clear is that conformity assessment is the next step. You know, people argue about how many standards we have, and that we should harmonize the standards. We should do a lot of this and that, but conformity assessment needs to be done, and for it to be done, we need to invest. And to invest in some of these conformity assessment facilities, experts and everything, we may need to actually pull the resources together. And that is one thing that is not avoidable. We need to do that. We need to have cross-border operations where people can actually go across the border. If it is certification, do it. If it is testing, they can do that. And we share the resources, bearing in mind that our countries, probably the economies are not so big enough to do that. Secondly, we need collaboration. For example, the collaboration between ARSO, AOAC, and other organizations that can assist with coming up with validated methods that are applicable to the products that we have in the continent is very critical, because sometimes, as I've always said, we have used approximate methods that do not give us the exact results of what we want, and therefore the products cannot go outside the continent, sometimes cannot even go out of the country. We need that kind of collaboration, and we need to ensure that we really work on that conformity assessment program. So the ARSO conformity assessment program, as I said, needs to be supported, and we need to work in collaboration with others to ensure that we have a very versatile and robust system that addresses the needs of the continent. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Weasley, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think for me, my parting shot will be to say conformity assessment should not be looked at as something that is too mountainous for us to climb and too big for us to achieve. Because sometimes we come up with these terminologies and these big words that we throw around, and we lose out on, in the context of my presentation today about SMEs, we lose them out because they feel this thing is just too much for me. But if you can be able to just bring it down to a level where many people can comply, then you can have our own self-declaration, to find a place where we can actually declare for ourselves that what we are saying, what we're doing is good. Otherwise, you'll always find these people who are trying to circumvent, find new ways to go across and not to follow the methods that are there. But if we just make it easy for them to comply, I think we stand a good chance of having Africa as a totally compliant continent of the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can hear now from Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. I think my parting shot would be that conformity assessment is key. It comes with a cost. But yes, of course, there's a need to improve our quality infrastructure. There's opportunities for us to harmonize standards and mutual recognition. But at the end of the day, we are trying to build trust. So testing, while it has a cost, will inevitably build trust. Testing will then be accepted across borders. There's a need for us to digitalize. That's the future. And therefore improve market access. This is very key for us in Africa. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you so much. Dr. Irene?
Yes, thank you. I think excellent points so far. I would just like to add that, part of the reason why the ARSO and AOAC joint agreement has so much potential is because of the way in which AOAC can be flexible and responsive to not only developing new standards, but, taking, I guess, less time to extend or modify existing standards to meet specific commodities within Africa, and keeping all of that work, which I realize is very important, within the continent of Africa. And so we have seen this work quite effectively with other sections and other countries that, may have some financial constraints. And I think these examples that I gave about collaborative initiatives that are of interest, like cassava or pesticides within multiple countries, is an excellent way to do this in a cost-effective but high-quality way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your message, and we have noted your message. So before we come to the end, mine just to thank you all for your contribution, your participation. I think we have learned a lot through different discussion and your presentation. I'm having two important communication before we invite the Secretary General to do closing remarks. Just to take this opportunity to remind you about the next webinar, which is on 26th March. It will be on the African strategy, commodities and trade, with the topic on the role of standardization in developing effective regional value chains for Africa strategy, commodities, and promotion of intra-Africa trade and global markets. We invite you all to participate and also contribute like you always do. Next communication is about the upcoming ARSO General, the 31st ARSO General Assembly meeting that will take place from 23rd to 27th June 2025 in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, under the theme of accelerating fair, just trade in Africa, under the African Continental Free Trade Area through the African Coherent Regulatory Framework and Harmonization Standards. SG, I would like to invite you to give us your closing remarks before we ask our panelists to put on their camera so that we can take a picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydian, for moderating very well. Thank you, our expert. I know Irene with the time difference in Cincinnati, but you managed to join us. Thank you very much. Douglas, Wendo, and Ruben. Thank you for your presentations. I would like to mention that we have 10 licenses to access AOC methods. Yeah. We have actually communicated to ARSO members that would like to get the license with regard to different methods. It's not just getting license, it's to be able to use also those methods. It's not just we give out those licenses to show that you need them for this purpose. And you have those communications, also members. Today we had more than 25 countries joining from Africa, Europe, Asia, US, and I appreciate your participation on our webinars. And I would like to mention that we will focus mainly this year on these different value chains that are priority sectors for the African Union. That include also what AOC presented, like infant food. That is one of the value chain, the 4 value chain that have been selected by the African Union in a Made by Africa study done jointly by ITC and African Union. I thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward seeing you on 26th March while we take up the challenge of the value chain and the role of standardization. Thank you, all of you, and as moderator is requesting, if you can put your camera on, then we can have a group picture, a virtual one. Yeah. Please put on your camera. I still see that we still have 130 people. If you can put on your camera and your nice smile. The presentations, I saw also that question. You can also find them on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.